There are many gurus out there that teach you to never force anything, especially not relationships. And they give you reasons as never force someone to stay that doesn't want to be there because it will lead to conflict, unnecessary trauma, or violence in the future. So that's the main reason they're using. And they use the empathic reason that you yourself wouldn't want to be forced to be somewhere you don't want to be. So they teach you never to force anything, but just to allow things to unfold naturally. But here's the problem with that. Or better, it's the problematic thing with that teaching. Even in nature, things don't just unfold like that. The reason why you have seasons and in seasons plants grow a certain way is because it's designed that way by God Himself. So it didn't just pop up out of nowhere, like the Big Bang Theory in the theory of evolution says. Nothing just pops up. For example, why do you speak your native language? Because it was forced on you by your environment. And your environment is a product of the past, of what your ancestors did. So you are the product of force. The ideas you have of how life should be, where did they come from? Not from you. And most likely, those were the ideas that were dominant in the area you grew up in. So if you did not comply with those ideas, you'd be in conflict with people. And being in conflict with people at a very young age is not a good thing. It can harm your mental development. So, based on your instincts, you complied. And you were formed by your environment. So, this whole idea of never force anything is not correct. It is BS. It doesn't add up. Now, it's true that there are certain things you shouldn't force because that may escalate. But the whole idea that you should never force anything, that's not natural and it's not even biblical. Don't realize that anytime you pray, you are forcing circumstances in a specific direction. That's what you're doing when you're praying. Praying is not about you feeling good about yourself, no matter what's going on. If that's why you're using prayer, then you're an addict, just like a drug addict. Because drug addicts just seek relief without dealing with what's going on. Prayer is not supposed to be used as a drug. In prayer, you exercise power. You exercise a push on circumstances. And here's the thing, others may not agree with your push, but it's still there. And here's the thing, you cannot ask permission from all the millions of human beings on the earth before you do something. That's not practical, that's not possible, that's nonsensical. So you cannot always have people's consent with everything. Now let me give an example to you. If you live in a community where there's a lot of domestic violence, and though that domestic violence, you have many messed up adults that become dangerous creeps. Now, the local authorities come with a law that everyone has to report domestic violence when they sense it. Those that don't can be fined or even imprisoned if things go out of hand. Now there are people protesting, well, this is privacy, you shouldn't, but it's none of the government's business what happens in the bedrooms or in people's living rooms. And you know what one of the legislators said? He said the following: we live in this community. And in this community, we have to do it with each other. And we affect one another. So we are responsible for what we enable. So everyone in this community has the obligation to contribute to safety and security. Those that don't want will be made to comply, or they'll be arrested and deported to a prison. And there are people upset with it because their so-called free will was violated. But then more people begin to realize that the legislation made sense. Why would you want to be in a community where nobody looks after you? Why would such a community demand acknowledgement from you while giving you nothing in return? And within less than a month, many incidents of domestic violence were discovered, and the perpetrators were upset because they were stuck in violating the members of their own household. And people agree, just because you pay rent somewhere doesn't mean you're a god over there. You can pay rent for a building, or you may even own a building. The moment you get out of hand and harm the community stops you and comes after you. And by the new legislation, many potential perpetrators realize, okay, if I go too far, I'm in big trouble. I get a record. After getting a record, I may not be able to get a job easily. People will avoid me. So, okay, I'm not doing it. So, in this case, the local authorities used force to make violent people comply with safety. They did it by shutting down the incentive to use violence. Now, what if some guru would have told the politician, no, sir, you should never force anything. If it's meant to be, it's meant to be. You just have to let it unfold. If they would follow that advice, they would just have to allow domestic violence to get out of hand to turn into tribal conflicts. You see where this is going? Too often we agree with statements that are pleasant to hear, but they are detrimental for both our personal as well as our collective well-being. There are certain things you shouldn't force. That's obvious. But there are things you should force. Force is not wrong. Force is not evil. Violence is. Violence is when you don't have your way and you lash out and cause harm to get validation. That is violence. Force is when something needs to be done, you use the force to get that thing done for the good of the community. So when you use force to achieve a good end that will benefit the collective, that is good. That is just. When you violate others just to be relieved, that is violence. Most people don't understand the difference between force and violence. I've just explained it to you again. I've explained it over and over again on the channel, and I just did. Violence is when you violate or neglect others just to get what you want. So violence isn't always punching people in the face or shooting people down. Violence can also be neglecting others or neglecting your community just to feel relieved or to escape. Force is when you persist to achieve a good end. So, you should never force anything. You should never force anyone. Those are two statements that come from the pits of hell. Only a fool or someone that's mentally retarded would agree with such a statement and apply it everywhere in daily life. And yet, you have millions that apply this even though they're not mentally retarded. But they act that way because they don't examine what they agree with. It's very important to examine what you agree with. So what if someone took offense at you because you didn't give in to their respect amount, and now they were murmuring, complaining about you, and other people joined in murmuring, complaining, and before you know it, you're on the psychic attack. You have all kinds of delays in your life, in your daily life. You have all kinds of health issues, and others tend to take advantage of it because they think when you are target of bad attention, it means it won't happen to me. So people enable it. So are you going to become a scapegoat and target for life, being ruined, drained, and becoming sick because others don't want to fix themselves? So they choose to be upset, they choose to become bitter, and now you need to carry the weight, whether you consent to it or not, just because they have a will, and you're not allowed to use prayer to backfire all this violence because you will be violating their will and what they want. Oh, just because they want something, you just have to find a way to deal with whatever they want? Are you kidding me? Never force anything, never force anyone. Okay, what if you're married and suddenly your husband walks away? He forfeits his responsibilities as a husband and father. And now you're left behind with a child. Are you going to let this man off the hook? Or are you going to report him so that he has to pay child support? The moment you report him to pay child support, the state, the government will force him to pay, or else the government will take action against him. Now some people would say, well, he doesn't want to be involved in the life of the child. That is his choice. You have to honor that. No. He's part of a human community. He chose to have sex, and the baby was the result. So now he needs to deal with what happened. What he wants or doesn't want is irrelevant. And if he neglects his natural obligation to the community, repercussions must follow. Don't you know that when you enforce such things in a direct way, a lot of men will think twice before just having sex with a woman? Because they'll realize if a baby comes and they walk away, they'll be in trouble. So they will have an incentive to form real and long-term relationships, because alternative would be horrible. You should never force anyone. So if you would follow that advice, anyone would be able to just run all in you and over you because they want something. Look, in the world they teach you to never force anything, but at the same time they teach you to enforce boundaries. Hold on a minute. Is it enforcing boundaries forcing something? So you're not allowed to force something when others may become upset. But you are allowed to force something when you want an escape or when you want control. So do you see how the world contradicts itself? You're not supposed to force anything nor force anyone, but you are supposed to enforce boundaries. This is what the world does. The world contradicts itself to cause cognitive dissonance in you. Look, when Christ told us to walk by faith, that means enforcing righteousness on the earth. And the resistance we would receive for doing this, we would overcome it. Because the inhabitants of the earth were never given an option nor a choice whether or not to serve the Heavenly Father. They don't. They don't. This whole idea of free will is a scam. Demons know it. Satan knows it. But a lot of human beings, they are so obsessed with this idea because it gives them an excuse to flee and to be cowards without consequences. And here's the thing, believers. Criminals are far more practical and realistic in this way. If a robber enters a shop and he has no gun with him or with her, I'm going to use the pronoun him now, or if he knows that he cannot shock people into complying, he won't get the money. He knows that to get the money, he needs to force people to give him the money. Because he knows that people wouldn't give the money to him voluntarily. You couldn't just walk in and say, I want 5,000 euros. People would ask, why, what for? Or they may want something back, but if they enforce it, they can get it for free. Well, there will be consequences, police may come after them, whatever, but they know that to get the outcome they're longing for, they need to use force, and they use it. Look, how come that predators and evildoers are more realistic than commoners? And that's why evildoers continue. That's why they're so successful, because the masses enable them with stupid statements they never examine. And the masses become upset with you. Now they want to come after you when you question whatever they expect. So you're not supposed to force anything on anyone, not to force anything, but society is entitled to force its expectations on you, and society is entitled to violate you when you don't meet their requirements. Come on. Who in their right mind would agree to something like this? Nobody in the right mind would. So, am I telling you to just go out there and bluntly just enforce things on other people? No, of course not. You should be able to account what you want. But here's the thing. If people resist what you want and their resistance is illegitimate, that means that they are persisting in negativity. That means that they are enabling evil. And if they persist in enabling evil, let them remain that way so that they will just ruin themselves. Because such people, they are miserable and they want you in their misery. That's why they resist your good influence. If you intervene in your community with prayer and people resist it, it is because they don't want to face themselves that they are bad people that enable evil. And you walking by faith and enforcing things reveals how filthy they are. If they resist it, you shake dust off your feet and you let them you let them self-destruct. Not because they have a right to self-destruct, but because they are going to play the victim when you keep enforcing justice on them. That's why God does not use instant force on the reprobate. He tolerates them to become worse and worse so that when Christ returns, they will have no excuse left. But even when they have no excuse left, they will still play the victim. They're obsessed with playing the victim to justify their violence. So there is no winning with such people. That's why we're shaking us off our feet. Not because they have free will, not because they have the right to choose whatever they want. They don't, absolutely not. But because God knows what type of creeps they are. Even when you do the right thing, they will feel upset that you're doing the right thing and they will play the victim as if the right thing harms them. To kind of justify the evil they persist in. But the moment you shake dust off your feet, now it's heaven's job to enforce. Now heaven has to respond. When heaven enforces a consequence, oh, they won't survive it. Think about Sodom and Gomorrah. After all the pleas of Abraham, they didn't want to comply, they persist in their negative wills. So, they even wanted to violate Lot, who was a believer. There was intervention from heaven. Oh, and Sodom was finished. So, nobody wills for free. Nobody. There is no free will, there's no privacy, there are no private lives, there are no personal spaces, there are no boundaries. Those things are narcissistic concepts. The earth is the Lord's and the fullness thereof. And you either are in line with God's will, then you're safe, or you are in darkness, which means you're in self-destruction. Plain and simple. All the rest are just castles built in the air. That's it for now. Keep on agreeing with Christ and be at peace.